All right, man, peace. So, one of the all-time great quarterbacks is Drew Brees. He is going to be participating in the NFC divisional round of the playoffs this coming weekend. And it brought about a very interesting topic, which is whether or not he may be a better all-time quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
To the NFC with the Saints head to Minnesota. Drew Brees looking to make another run at the Super Bowl. Now, he already owns a bunch of records, like all-time NFL stuff, but he's been out of the playoffs for 4 years, which could explain why we haven't talked much about Brees in recent years. But if you compare him to a guy we never stopped talking about, Aaron Rodgers, Brees actually comes out looking great with the best passing yards per game, completion percentage ever, 300-yard games all time. Whitlock, would Brees pass Aaron Rodgers with another Super Bowl?
No, and I'll explain why. Drew Brees, when he didn't have everything rolling, guess where he was in January? At home, on a golf course. Aaron Rodgers, whenever he's on the field for 15, 16 games in a year, you know where he's at in January? Playing a playoff game.
I agree, and beyond that, before I let Whitlock go on, Aaron Rodgers is just better than Drew Brees in just about every category when it comes to ability. Now, if we want to list statistics, Drew Brees is going to win that because he has the benefit of a system that has been tailor-made for him. He also plays in a dome, and he's had the comfort of having a head coach who's also an offensive mastermind. Now, some people may allege that Aaron Rodgers also has a head coach that is an offensive mastermind. I would dispute that. I think that Mike McCarthy is someone who is a good coach, but nowhere near as good as the head coach that Drew Brees has, who has done everything in his power to make sure that Drew Brees is comfortable. Now, that's by no means to try to diminish the greatness of Drew Brees. I do believe that he's arguably the greatest overachiever in sports history to be a 5'11" quarterback. And by the time he retires, will probably have every record in the NFL record book.
Okay. May lose it, but he always qualifies. You started out that talking about 4 straight years. This is the first time they've been in the playoffs for 4 years. That doesn't happen to Aaron Rodgers when he's healthy.
And beyond that, Aaron just does more with less than any other quarterback in the NFL. He's the most naturally gifted quarterback I've ever seen in every category. He literally has no weaknesses. None. I mean, when I was a kid, John Elway was probably the most talented quarterback that I'd ever seen in regards to legs, brain, arm, clutch play, things of that nature. Aaron Rodgers is better than John Elway was, in my view, in every category except probably clutch play. I think if there's one thing that you can kind of nitpick about Aaron would be he does not come up as big in the clutch as you would expect him to. He does not have that level of clutch gene of a Joe Montana, Tom Brady, and a John Elway. But he still has had some pressure performances where he's led some late game drives and had some late game heroics, but not to the level of those other 3 quarterbacks. But in every other category, he outdoes Drew Brees, and to me, Drew Brees just throws too many interceptions. At least in regards to being compared with an Aaron Rodgers. No.
And so I love Drew Brees. I think he's tremendous. But when you start talking about Aaron Rodgers, Steve Young is the only guy that's ever had as much talent as Aaron Rodgers.
Look, I remember being a kid and watching Steve Young take over for Joe Montana. Steve Young was a great quarterback, extremely accurate. He was a left-hander, great feet, but he was someone who you could not trust in big games. That 1994 run that they had when they had Deion Sanders for that 1 year, they basically had to help Steve through a lot of his psychological issues in clutch games because he was not a good quarterback in big game situations. He would put up great stats in the regular season, but when he got to the playoffs, he did not perform as well as he should have. And it cost him a lot of late postseason runs. He just could not beat the Cowboys, and then later on, he just couldn't beat Green Bay. Other than that one play to Terrell Owens. But Steve Young was an all-time great. There's no doubt about that. But to say that he was as talented as Aaron Rodgers, no.
And Aaron Rodgers won 2 MVPs and should have, if he had more support, should have won more. I'm not trying to diss Drew Brees at all, but he ain't Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
I would love to.
By the way, did Aaron Rodgers have to deal with Bountygate? Lost his coach. Katrina? Far worse defenses? Dysfunction from the owner?
Far worse defenses?
Actually, Drew's had 8 bottom 10 defenses in his career. Aaron's had 2.
Great points. Great points.
4 times as many bad defenses. Lost his head coach. Katrina, Bountygate, and by the way, crazy owner.
What position did Katrina play?
You don't think it was disruptive? It displaced people. You don't think that for 3 years it owned the community? I'm just telling you, in life, what did you inherit? Like Dak Prescott, don't we all admit? He's got a pretty good old line. He's got Ezekiel Elliott. He's got some gifts others don't. I think, by the way, if Brees holds 9 all-time records, Aaron Rodgers doesn't hold 9 all-time records.
Well, you know what? That also that's also based on the system that Drew Brees runs. That system is configured to maximize his passing ability, and he does have great passing ability. That's why I call him arguably the greatest overachiever in sports history. But holding all the records does not necessarily make you the greatest player. Michael Jordan is considered the greatest player in NBA history, and he doesn't really hold many records other than average points per game. And I believe he holds the record for highest player efficiency rating for a career. But other than that, you really can't quantify greatness. I mean, it's a combination of statistics, performance, and intangibles. Because if we're just going by stats, then Wilt Chamberlain is the greatest NBA player of all time.
That's pretty good.
Okay. If we're looking at statistics, and we're doing the blind statistics test, absolutely. Is Drew Brees better statistically? Yeah, we can skew it all day. And his stats that he owns of leading, they don't lie. But when you look at the body of work, since Aaron Rodgers started at quarterback in Green Bay in 2008, he's missed 18 games. Drew Brees has missed 2. So we haven't seen who the New Orleans Saints are with.
Aaron Rodgers makes the most unbelievable throws of any quarterback I've ever seen. That throw that he made right there in the NFC divisional game against the Cowboys, rolling left and hitting that tight end right there on the edge of the sideline. It's one of the great throws in a playoff game that I've ever seen. I mean, it's just Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys that you would have had to have seen play to understand how great he was. Like 15, 20 years from now, if this world is still around, people are going to have to explain how good he was, just like how people now have to explain Michael Jordan.
Without Drew Brees, we see the value in who the Green Bay Packers is without Aaron Rodgers. And this is who they are. They're non-existent in this time of the year. That's why the value of who Aaron Rodgers is greater, because we know what that Green Bay G looks like without having him at quarterback.
And the reason why Aaron is so great at throwing those Hail Mary passes is because he can throw it 60 yards downfield while throwing it damn near 60 yards up in the air. So it gives his receivers all the time in the world to get into the end zone and prepare themselves to catch the football. And of course, wide receivers and tight ends, you expect them to have greater hands and timing for the jump pass than a defensive back would have. So it's not as much luck involved in the conversion of Hail Mary passes as one would think, especially when you're able to execute properly.
We don't know what the New Orleans Saints are without Drew Brees. Now, is he underrated at times? Yes. But to say just because if he needs to win another Super Bowl, and he will be better, I don't buy that. And then Aaron Rodgers is not on the end of his career. He's still peaking, if not, maybe some would say he's peaked.
Well,
I think that he's at the end of his peak. When you get to about 33, 34, you're now at the end of your peak as a professional athlete. You're going to start to see a decline, but when you're at the level of an Aaron Rodgers and when you have the brain that he has for football, his decline is going to be, eventually it's going to be noticeable, but he's still going to be above the rest.
Well, he's still in his prime.
Yeah, but wow. First of all, this is a hard
choice.
No, it's really not that hard.
It is.
It really is. I mean, man, you're talking about Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers.
At the end of the day, it's like this for me. You have one guy in Aaron Rodgers who you expect to throw 4 to 5 times. Really, I shouldn't even say 5 times. You expect Aaron Rodgers to throw anywhere from 7 to 8 times more touchdowns than interceptions. And then you have a guy like a Drew Brees who normally is going to throw double-digit interceptions. He's going to have a high completion percentage because he plays indoors and they throw a lot of screens. It's just a different style of quarterback play. Aaron Rodgers' style of quarterback play is far more improvisational because of the things that he can do with his feet and with his arm. With Drew Brees, he has to have the right architect, the correct offensive orchestrator as an offensive coordinator as well as a head coach. They all have to be moving on one accord to help him out. And that's not to take anything away from him. But his surrounding pieces have to be far greater than an Aaron Rodgers.
I mean, if you're flipping a coin, that's just preference if you pick Aaron over Drew.
Nah, bro. Nah.
Right.
Listen,
I can't believe you said
it's just preference.
Hey, let me no.
In the history of this game, if you come into this business and you own 9+ records
All
at
time.
your position all time,
Wow.
are you even considered to be the greatest? Really?
Well, look, I would say this, and I will use the same analogy as many people use in regards to the all-time NBA greats when they say that LeBron James can sit at the table. Drew Brees could sit at the table with Joe Montana and Tom Brady, John Elway, and Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers is going to sit closer to the head of the table than Drew Brees. I think that Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Dan Marino, they're all in that same category together. They're not on the level of Elway, Montana, and Brady because they haven't won as much as those other guys have won. But in regards to their offensive output and their impact on the field, then yeah, they're in the same family. But what sets Aaron apart from Drew Brees is just his overall physical abilities.
And because if somebody has better chances in the postseason than you, that makes you
Better chances or makes better chances for himself.
I understand. Look, being in the Pro Bowl, you get to play with everybody, all the best. I'm standing in the Pro Bowl. We're in Hawaii. Fitzgerald leans over. Do you see Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball versus Drew? And Cam was there too. He's not even in the conversation. But how effortless it is for him. Everything is so easy for Aaron Rodgers. It's no comparison.
The biggest deal. One plays in a dome and one plays outside in the element.
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah. One plays.
No wonder the stats are so outside.
One has Cleveland, one has Detroit and Chicago in their division.
No.
2 of the 3 most
That is
dysfunctional
huge.
organizations.
That is huge.
You telling me
Indoor versus
that?
outdoors.
And whose choice is that? It's not his choice.
Exactly. It's not his, so it doesn't matter whose choice it is.
Yeah, but it has to be factored in when you're going to compare them, Ray. Like, no disrespect, but Ray Lewis should not even be in this conversation. For a guy who you would consider an all-time great NFL player in Ray Lewis, he just comes off like an idiot when he's not talking about middle linebackers. Like Ray is someone that you want to have involved in a roundtable discussion about middle linebackers and defenses, not NFL quarterbacks. When you're going to evaluate greatness as an NFL quarterback, you have to go through different parameters. One of them being, where do they have to play? Everyone knows that for a quarterback to be successful in Green Bay, he has to have a very, very strong arm and a large hand, because he's going to be throwing in conditions where the ball's going to slip out. That's why Drew Brees has such a lack of success in road playoff games. He struggles a lot on the road because he is a smaller guy for a quarterback, and it is difficult for him to see over defensive linemen, and he does end up throwing a lot of interceptions because sometimes his football tends to drift and his football tends to float when he's not in prime conditions.
Drew chose to go there.
You're telling me throwing in the elements versus throwing in the control. That's the whole thing with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady to me.
Agreed.
Brady's far better than Peyton Manning, and I love Peyton Manning. But you play in a controlled environment like a dome, that's where you put up the video numbers.
Agreed.
This is what I cannot believe. That you guys are saying Drew Brees with 9 NFL records.
All time.
All time. It's not, you basically, from what we're saying is, he's not even in the conversation of being with Aaron Rodgers.
Well, he's in the conversation because y'all having a conversation. So it's a conversation. It just doesn't mean that it's realistic. It's like the LeBron James versus Michael Jordan conversation. It's a conversation. You're going to have people who are going to say LeBron is bigger, stronger, yada, yada, yada. He's had more rebounds, more assists, blah, blah, blah. But when we start to get down to the nitty gritty of comparing the two, then it's going to be a very, very clear distinction. Same thing with Drew Brees and Rodgers. And, Colin's hypothetical question seems to imply that that Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers have had a rather indistinguishable career, and that Drew Brees would pass, quote unquote, Aaron Rodgers if he won another Super Bowl. I don't see that. I don't believe that Drew Brees is on Aaron Rodgers' level. And that by no means is a diminishing of Drew Brees' greatness. He's an all-time great, first ballot Hall of Famer. He brought a Super Bowl to New Orleans. But if we're going to list criteria for quarterbacks, I don't think that there's one that Drew Brees would win over Aaron Rodgers. Not one.
No, I'm not saying he's not in the conversation.
If you're flipping a coin.
I can't do that.
Nah, bro. It's not a coin flip. It's not a coin toss.
How about this?
I mean,
Aaron is...
Like, to me, LeBron James, Magic, and Larry Bird, that's a coin toss. Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers, that's not a coin toss. Nah.
Aaron is more fun to watch. That's indisputable. Okay.
I don't know if that's true.
By the way, Donald Trump...
Great.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
Come on.
Oh, no.
I'm in another world.
Aaron Rodgers is more fun to watch because he's got the arm. Yeah, Mark Cuban and Trump are more interesting billionaires. Warren Buffett's smarter than both. Just because you're we fall in love with Rodgers because, by the way, you just told me he's missed 9 times more games than Brees. No, that's funny. The small guy, the grinder, who's had injuries, never gets hurt.
Well, that's because, and that's a good attempt at a point by Colin, but the reason why Aaron Rodgers gets hurt more than Drew Brees goes back to my point about him being more of an improvisational quarterback. They're going to roll him out more. They're going to sprint him out more, both to the left and to the right, because of his great arm and his mobility. Drew Brees has to stay in the pocket because they know that if he gets outside the pocket, he's more likely to get hurt because he's a smaller man. Beyond that, he has a weaker arm than Aaron. So their passing scheme is based in him finding passing lanes in the pocket. So that's why Aaron Rodgers would miss more games than Drew Brees. If you look at most of Aaron's injuries, a lot of them are collarbone injuries that have to do with him rolling outside the pocket.
109 300 passing games.
Wait a minute.
109.
Wait a minute, because
did you see how many Aaron
You
had?
just said Trump and all these guys, and then Warren Buffett's smarter. So you're saying Drew Brees is smarter than Aaron Rodgers?
No, that's the smart thing. What I'm saying is, Cuban and Trump are billionaires that are fun to talk about. They're fun. They're big. They're opinionists. Warren Buffett's an old guy that does numbers.
I understand.
Aaron Rodgers is more fun to talk about than Brees.
But again, when you start talking about Cuban and Trump and then Buffett, you're taking away Aaron Rodgers' substance. There's substance to Aaron Rodgers and what he's accomplished following in behind Brett Favre.
I agree with that. He followed behind a living legend in Brett Favre. Very similar to a Steve Young. So I see why Whitlock made the comparison between Aaron Rodgers and Steve Young. They both had to follow behind legends, which is the reason why Bill Belichick is so upset in New England, because he wanted to have the opportunity to have Tom Brady get followed by Jimmy Garoppolo and prove his own greatness as a coach by winning 2 or 3 more Super Bowls with Garoppolo.
He had to sit. He had to sit. He didn't get to play immediately. And we're wondering why his stats aren't on pace with Drew Brees.
By the way,
that's a good point.
That's an advantage. So Aaron Rodgers...
What?
First of all...
Sitting is an advantage.
You need to stop this.
First of all, Aaron Rodgers
What
has...
year is this for Drew Brees? Do we have that? What years is Drew?
17, something like
What
that.
years?
Yeah, he's 38 years old, and they're comparing their numbers They're comparing career numbers when you have one guy who's 38, 39 and Drew Brees, and another guy who's like 33 and Aaron Rodgers.
Here's this for Aaron. 13, 14.
17 for Brees.
13,
13, yeah.
13.
And one guy had to sit
Yeah, so we're
behind
telling
Brett
him
Favre.
to keep going.
So one guy,
Keep
Aaron
going.
Rodgers.
Aaron, these numbers that he has put up, it's 10 years worth of playing. 10 years worth of playing.
Aaron Rodgers inherited a great team.
A great
Drew
team.
Brees inherited the laughing stock of the league, the Cleveland of its time.
And you know what? And to put up numbers that's playing from behind more than the other guy. Again, I'm not remotely knocking Drew Brees, but
You gotta be. Gotta be.
I'm not
Because
knocking
that
it. I love
guy-
Drew Brees. I love Drew Brees.
you know how much easier it is to play defense in Baltimore? I mean, if London Fletcher had played in Baltimore with Agata and those guys, he would be sitting here and you would be wherever London is. Coming up.
But anyway, I thought that was a very, very interesting conversation, the comparison between Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers. This is a good conversation, but we already know what the answer is. Aaron Rodgers, in my view, is the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. I mean, he could make every play, make every throw, make every read. If you had him on a talented team with a coach that had a better offensive mind, I think he probably would have won 4 or 5 Super Bowls already. But anyway, peace.